name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. There is not a large crowd in Jerusalem today. There usually is on Palm Sunday, as thousands of the faithful gather on the Mount of Olives to follow the path Jesus may have taken to enter into the city. But not this year. This year, for the same reason that we worship together digitally instead of physically, there isn't a large crowd in Jerusalem. Of course, if you've been following Mother Claire's class as we study Amy Jill Levine's book, Entering the Passion of Jesus, you'll know that there probably wasn't a huge crowd for that first Palm Sunday entrance either. A few dozen followers, perhaps. A few locals who have come out to see what's going on. There's not a large crowd here today either, of course. Because of social distancing, there are enough of us here to commemorate this holy day, trusting that many of you will be joining us to worship online together. So in this way, unlike the traditional annual commemoration of Palm Sunday, you and I and millions of other worshipers across the world who are worshiping from home because of social distancing are closer to that original event than we might think. Very small groups of us, together yet apart, as we mark the day that begins the holiest of our weeks. One of my preaching professors made the point very emphatically to us that we shouldn't try to preach the whole Passion reading on Palm Sunday. There's too much there, he said. You can't possibly get to all of it. Pick one small part if you're going to preach the Passion. But I've never felt that advice so closely as I do today. Today I know which part to preach because today I know which part we followers of Jesus must relate to. Today we are not Pilate, washing our hands of a situation we could have changed. Today we are not the crowd gathered to yell, "Crucify him," although we know that that ugly impulse to hurt the other that has plagued us humans since the beginning of time will unfortunately find us again. No, today we are the disciples, waiting with Jesus in the garden. We are the people to whom Jesus says, "Can you not keep watch with me 1 hour?" When I went to Jerusalem during seminary, one of the many beautiful churches we visited was the Church of All Nations, also known as the Basilica of the Agony. It marks the spot in what is believed to be the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus may have withdrawn that night to pray. The church is owned by the Franciscan Custody of the Holy Land, part of the Order of Franciscan monks. The building is wired for sound, and it's supposed to be set apart as a holy place, a place for quietness and contemplation. But the day that I was there, a day when there certainly were large crowds gathered, the place positively bustled with pilgrims, come to see the place where Jesus prayed in agony. Not quiet, not contemplative. The monks do not like it when people are loud in the Basilica of the Agony. So about every 90 seconds, the day that I was there, came a very loud voice over the sound system, the voice of an angry monk. "Be quiet, please. Move along, please. Be quiet, please." That day I was made aware of a truth that I have been reminded of again this month. There in the place where Christ asked his disciples to keep vigil while he went on to pray, there that day hundreds and hundreds of Jesus' followers were having the same problem the disciples did. Granted, the pilgrims in the church that day were not falling asleep, but they, like the disciples, couldn't help but concede to their need for comfort. For the disciples, it was the need to sleep, even in the most important hour of their lives, when staying awake was all that was asked. For the pilgrims in the church, it was the need to speak, to talk about the things they were seeing in the very place where quiet was all that was asked. Jesus sometimes asks of us things that seem so easy and yet are so hard. Can you not watch with me 1 hour? Jesus says to his disciples in the garden. He asks them to give up their comfort for a moment in order to be there for him. And the reason it is so clear to me that we are the disciples in the story today is that we too are now asked to give up a bit of our comfort on behalf of those who are suffering and those who are most vulnerable. In a twist of irony, one thing we have had to give up for others is the ability to gather and to celebrate physically this holy day with each other. But we are assured that we are doing the right thing as disciples, because the Jesus who came to be born among us, to experience life with us, to suffer and die for us when we were most alone and most in danger, now asks us to keep vigil with him, to self-quarantine with him so that others might be saved. Jesus is always on the side of the vulnerable. And so Jesus asks us as disciples to care for them by staying home now. Yes, it is hard. Yes, our need for comfort tempts us out to look for relief in the company of others. But it is at this moment we most need to remember that Jesus is asking us to watch with him for just 1 hour. We could fall asleep and miss our chance like the disciples, or we can watch with Jesus at this moment of great significance in our common life. There is no large crowd gathered today in Jerusalem, or in Rome, or in New York, or Chattanooga. But that doesn't mean that there aren't parades carrying on the work of God in our midst. There are parades of healthcare workers headed back in for another day of work to care for the sick and the scared, the lonely and the afraid. There are parades of grocery stockers and baggers and deliverers, making sure that people have access to the necessities of life. There are parades of cafeteria workers making sandwiches and stuffing lunch bags for school-aged kids all around our city, and bus drivers delivering them so that the indefinite cancellation of school doesn't mean the cancellation of lunch for so many of our economically vulnerable neighbors. If you and I are not essential workers, we are asked for now not to make a non-essential physical parade. We are asked to stay home, to keep others safe, to tend to our physical and our spiritual lives. And today, in addition to the advice given by the public health authorities, your clergy remind you to pray. This is the parade we can form today. We ask you to join us in praying for those who are treating our sick, for those who are bagging our groceries, for those who are collecting our garbage and driving our buses, for those who work for the common good while others sleep. For Palm Sunday 2020, we cannot parade in person, but we ask you to join a procession of prayer that runs through every age, in which the people of God intercede for the needs of the world. If you do this, you will be blessed, because you will have kept watch with Jesus in this holiest of weeks.